Hi YouTube, welcome to another edition of Horror Hounds, and for this video I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to go into a bit of a discussion, if you like, as to why bad movies are still important for your collection and why I still enjoy owning movies that are really bad. So I'm hoping this will elicit a little bit of discussion. Hopefully you guys can give me your opinions, which you're so good at doing on this channel, and you can perhaps have a listen to what I have to say and let me know if I'm talking nonsense or if anything that I say makes sense. So I guess we should start out by saying there's no kind of like unequivocally bad movie. What I think are good movies people think are terrible, and vice versa. But I've tried to pick out what for the most part are kind of like renownedly bad movies that are pretty terrible, and I can kind of I've gone through sort of varying degrees of badness, if you will, and I'm going to try and state my case and explain why I still like having these terrible movies in my collection. So kind of just the first thing is I mean, for a collector like me and a lot of people out there, the people who buy a lot of movies, you will inevitably pick up some stinkers every now and again. I do. I have some really bad movies, but the way I look at it is I always try and think positively, and even though some of these movies are terrible, try and think that people did still take the time to make them. People took the time to produce them and release them. Even if it's got some cool cover art, people took the time to do that, and it would be really unfortunate if a film was completely forgotten about or left behind. So in some way, even though a film is terrible, I think it's still nice to preserve that for what it is, if that makes any kind of sense. So, like I say, I'm going to go through a few different stages of bad movies. The first movies that I want to talk about are the out and out bad movies, the ones that are almost legendary in their bad movie status. So something like Birdemic, which a couple of months ago I did a countdown of the worst movies in my collection. Now, for some reason, I forgot about this movie. I don't know how I forgot about it, because it should have been number one. It is the worst movie in my collection. It's regarded by a lot of people of being the worst movie ever made. And it's almost sort of reached cult status for being so indescribably bad. So amongst movie aficionados, something like Birdemic is actually kind of very well known for how bad it is. There's also other renownedly bad movies such as Troll 2. Now this one is often kind of officially classed as the worst movie ever made. It's pretty bad. I don't know if I would agree with the worst movie ever made, but yeah, it's not great. But again, it's quite recognisable in that kind of terrible movie aspect. And then in more recent times we have Sharknado, which somehow has spawned an entire franchise, and in this day and age I don't think there've been many people who actually didn't know at least the title of Sharknado. So these kind of movies here, they're flat out terrible, but they have somehow made a name for themselves as being terrible movies. So I like to own these just for kind of the recognisability of them, because they're almost like quite culturally recognisable. For someone like me that's trying to build the collection, I have them because they are quite well-known movies, and if someone scans the collection, they can say, oh yeah, he's even got Sharknado and Troll 2 and Birdemic. So I like to have them represented in the collection for those reasons. So yeah, bad movies that somehow have kind of made a mark and have a presence out there on the market. Okay, now the flip side of that is terrible movies which are now forgotten. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying, that even though they are terrible, and these movies here are terrible, it's a shame that they are forgotten. I think films should always be preserved in some way, just for what they are. So the first movie of that kind of ilk is Science Crazed. Now, in the aforementioned video that I talked about, the worst movies in my collection, this was number one, and you know, it's really not far behind Birdemic. It's a terrible film and a real struggle to get through. But because it's kind of forgotten now, I really don't hear anybody ever talk about Science Crazed, and I doubt I ever will. There's almost kind of a novelty to owning it, in that kind of only me and a few other people will know about this movie. And like I say, I don't want it to completely get forgotten, no matter how terrible it is. Oops. That's right, it's only Science Crazed. And then the next movie, something like Sick, again, awful movie, but I just don't hear people talk about it. I don't see it around, I don't see people reviewing it. Essentially, it's pretty much a forgotten, terrible movie, and these are the ones you kind of just have to get and look after, and just, I think, keep them safe on the shelf, just because they're so obscure. And if I got rid of it, I don't know if I'd ever come across it again. So just for reasons like that. So that is that one. And then next up you have kind of terrible movies that were sort of forgotten, like Sick and Science Crazed, but have now been recognised with like a really boutique release. So something like Blood Theatre from Vinegar Syndrome, who are particularly good at preserving terrible films and giving them nice, fancy, shiny releases. So Blood Theatre, terrible film. Everyone who I talk to who've seen this agrees with me. It's an awful movie. It's only about an hour long, and boy, will you feel every single minute of that hour. It's so slow. But Vinegar Syndrome have taken it, given it this really nice, fancy limited edition slipcover, remastered it and put it out there in a really nice, fancy release. And because the movie is so terrible, it's almost like a novelty in itself to have this movie and keep it on the shelf, and know that it's terrible, but have it in this really nice release. I think there's something quite unique about that. So that's kind of the flip side to the forgotten terrible films. Okay, and then there are kind of bad movies, but I don't consider them bad. It's just that they have kind of fizzled off now. They are pretty obscure. They don't have any more commercial appeal. So you won't see these kind of on mainstream TV. You won't see them on streaming services, I don't think. So something like 555, which is a real trashy shot on video movie. Now I actually quite enjoyed this for what it is, but like I say, commercially you're never going to see sort of big companies releasing this or streaming services putting it out there or anything like that. And these are the ones for me that are kind of really worth keeping and having on the shelf. Even though 555 looks horrible and is really low budget, I would hate for this to just completely disappear, because I enjoy it. And if I didn't have it, I don't know where else I would see it, and that kind of thing. Similar to that, something like The Legend of Boggy Creek, which for me is a great movie. I'm not dissing Boggy Creek at all. It's a fantastic low budget Bigfoot movie. But again, I doubt it's very commercially appealing. Big companies, streaming services, things like that are not going to home into Legend of Boggy Creek and think, let's put that out there. So kind of, you just have to buy it in whatever form it's in, and in my case, keep it on the shelf and enjoy it, because again, if I didn't have it, I don't know where I would see The Legend of Boggy Creek. So I hope that kind of makes sense. The main thing for me, like I say, is kind of preserving these movies, and although they're terrible films, like I say, they all kind of have their own artistic merit somewhere if you look hard enough. Even if they're terrible, that they made you laugh when they shouldn't have done, or you watched them with a friend and you both sort of looked at each other thinking, what on earth am I watching? Or if they're terrible but for some reason there's something about them that you like, I wouldn't want to not have them in the collection. I like to have them represented and preserved if necessary, just so somebody somewhere has a copy of this movie, and why not be me? So I hope that makes sense. Like I say, guys, let me know your thoughts on this one. I know there's a lot of people who get a movie, don't like it, and then sell it on, which is totally fine. I can see the benefits of that. It's just not something that I'm discussing in this video. But let me know what you think. Have I swayed you into keeping anything, or am I just talking nonsense and these movies should go and be replaced with something better? So thank you very much for watching, guys, and stay tuned for more videos.